Well, I was working on these pitot tubes, the pitot-static tubes, the other night, and I got them all cleaned up down to the end where they hook onto the pitot tube, but I didn't really get very good out here on this end where it sticks through the wing root. This aluminum tubing is flexible enough, soft enough that it bends just picking it up. Moving it around, the weight on the end of it is enough to bend it. But when I come down to the ends here where it already been bent some around these fittings, that was hard. It had been work hardened. I just got done annealing these. Aluminum and copper both work hardened, and they should be annealed every so often. Otherwise they'll crack just from vibration and whatnot. So anyway, I got these annealed, and now I was able to straighten these tubes out, and now I can bend them when it goes around this wing root here. So I brought the torch up here. I was thinking about using it to anneal that wingtip leading edge. It turned out I didn't need that. I was able to work the dents out of it as much as I could by just cold working it. Iron alloys are pretty easy to anneal. You heat them up to a certain temperature, and it depends on the alloy, but generally it's around cherry red. And let it heat soak at that temperature, and then just let it cool in still air, and that softens the alloy. Copper and aluminum are both a little bit different. You heat those up and then quench them, which is just the opposite of an iron alloy. An iron alloy, if you heat it up and quench it, it hardens it up. But with copper and aluminum, they both soften when you heat them up and quench them. Now copper is pretty easy. Just heat it up red hot and then quench it. But aluminum is a different cat. Aluminum is shiny silver anyway, and the color change is so subtle on it that unless you can really see it, I've done it before by looking at the color change in the aluminum, but if it's a fine line between heating it up hot enough and heating it up to where it melts into a puddle. Now there's different ways you can do that. There is some colored chalks and colored paints that you can apply to the item that you want to heat up, and that stuff will either change color or melt off at a certain temperature, at the temperature you want to get to anneal it. Another trick we've used before in the field is to take a carburizing flame on an oxyacetylene torch, basically just a plain acetylene flame, and coat it with soot, and then use a neutral flame, and then just heat it up until the soot starts burning off. I've heard you can do the same thing with soap. I can't use my oxyacetylene or that soot method because I'm out of acetylene and out of oxygen, so my oxyacetylene system is out of business for right now. Well, I was just really careful with this. I just took it outside and heated it up, and luckily I heated it up to the right temperature where it annealed it, so that stuff smoothed out pretty good. Well, now I'll be able to rebend this. This gets fed in along this spar behind these fuel tank straps and out past the ribs out this way, and then turns and goes over to where the pitot tube attaches. So now I'll be able to feed this through there and make a turn around here through here, and it won't be hard like the old one was. Yesterday I come down here and worked on this bell crank for this flap. I put the return spring on there so I can put this false spar on for this inboard false spar for this flap. And then last night I come up here and worked on this a little bit more. I got these pitot-static lines run. I'd cleaned those up before and straightened them out and everything, but had them sitting here kind of waiting to get them set up the way I wanted to put them in. And what I did was I put heat shrink tubing on them to hold them together so they don't bounce around and vibrate, and hold them in position. So that's where they are there. They go down through those ribs over there to where the pitot tube mounts up, and then they've got a bend in them that comes up and goes down, which will keep water from building up in that. It's a pain when the water builds up in your pitot-static system and freezes up in the wintertime. Been there, done that. So anyway, those are tied in to the ribs, on the struts on the ribs with, well, originally it was friction tape, And I really couldn't think of a better thing to put on there than that, so that's what I did. I got some friction tape, and this tape that I got is better than the old friction tape that I've had before. This stuff advertised, I think I got it off of Amazon, and it was advertised as wiring loam tape for taping up wire bundles and stuff. And that is some really nice tape. It's tighter weave than the original regular friction tape that I've dealt with. It tears nice and everything, and it's got some good adhesive on them, so it sticks real well. Well, anyway, I've run that there on the ribs, run the pitot tube. It goes diagonally through the ribs there, and then over, takes a bend, and then runs down the inside of this strut over here. Oh, and I put some heat shrink tubing on some places there where it looked like it might be fretting a little bit as it went through by that fuel tank. Help protect it there. Well, anyway, that is run. I threaded the wires for the landing lights through there the other day, but I hadn't put the wire for the nav light in yet. And that wire bundle, it had tape wrapped around structure on the ribs and then was taped to those. And again, I don't see a better way of doing that. I like using cable clamps and stuff, but there's no practical way of adding cable clamps to those. Well, anyway, I ran those cables through there the other day, and I just went through last night and taped up the ribs where I'm going to tape the wires down to it. And then I dug out some 16 gauge wire to use for the nav light and ran it all the way down there. So that looks pretty good. The wire still needs to be taped down, but I need to run reinforcing string through these ribs before I do that. These main ribs here go all the way through, and they're fairly stiff. They do wiggle a little bit, but these nose ribs, they're just attached here in two spots with two screws, and they flop around pretty good. So they want you to run string between these ribs to tie those together to stiffen those up so they don't move when you put the leading edges on. And then you need strings between the ribs here, the main ribs too, so that they don't flop around so much like that. There's a fella by the name of Kirk Ellis, and he is second generation Alaska bush pilot. His family's been flying in the bush in Alaska in the interior. Well, like I said, he's second generation. His family's been doing that for years. They've had a lodge out in the bush in Alaska, and they've flown hunters and fishermen and done a lot of flying like that. And he's a sharp Super Cub guy, and he's a mechanic too. I met him a few years ago when I went up to Birchwood to pick up the fuselage for the airplane when I replaced the fuselage in the airplane. And he seems like a nice guy. And I saw a video of his the other day. He had a deal where showing things you need to look out for on the wings of a Cub. And what he is doing is taking sheet metal aluminum and closing in this bay so he could bring the fabric out to here and glue it down so it was all one piece here, and then putting a separate piece of fabric over the wingtip so that if you hit the wingtip and broke a wingtip bow or something like that, you have to take the fabric off, peel the fabric back to get to the wingtip bow to replace it or repair it. Normally the fabric goes all the way from the wing root all the way out here to the wing tip, and if you take the fabric off there, then that loosens the fabric up on the whole wing. And by taking and making two pieces out of it and gluing it down out here on this edge, it makes it easier to do the repair on the wing. You don't have to loosen the whole fabric up on the whole wing, which is a really good idea. But I got to looking, and this is all of the 16 thousandths aluminum that I have left, and it would take me a month to get another piece of it, enough to close in that wing like he was suggesting on that. I have some heavier stuff, but I don't want to go with 40 thousandths on that, so that's just too much weight out there. So anyway, I guess I'm not going to do that.